Good evening. It's 7 o'clock, and I guess we should probably call the meeting to order. So can we have the roll call, please, Lynn?
Yes. Commissioner Arata, absent. Commissioner Bajaj,
Present.
Commissioner Funabashi,
Here.
Commissioner Nafisi,
Here.
Commissioner Glass, absent. Commissioner Min,
Here.
Chair Simpson.
I am here.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Need to get your speakers on. So we've had the roll call. Let's have the salute to the flag, please. Candace, could you lead us in that, please?
Sure. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve the order of the agenda?
I'll make a motion as presented.
And can we get a second for that motion, please?
I'll second.
Commissioner Bajaj seconds. You need to get your microphone on there. Just hold it. Yeah, there you go.
All right, I second.
All in favor of approving the order of the agenda? Do we? No, we don't need comments on that, do we? All those in favor of approving the order of the agenda? I guess we can just do that with a voice vote. All opposed, say nay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Blue folder items, have we got any of those?
We do have blue folder items.
Okay.
You'll need to make a motion to receive and file.
Okay, can we make a motion to receive and file those blue folder items?
I can make a motion to receive and file blue folder items.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we will receive those. Okay, now it's time for the consent calendar. Are there any items there that anyone wishes to pull out for the consent calendar and discuss separately, or are we happy to let that go through and consider it in one thing? Anybody want to pull anything from the consent calendar? Okay. Are there any comments on the consent calendar? Any e-comments on the consent calendar?
There are no e-comments.
Okay, then can we have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I'll make the motion to approve the consent calendar.
And is there a second?
Second.
Let's have a roll call on that, I guess.
Sure. Commissioner Bajaj,
Yes.
Commissioner Funabashi,
Yes.
Commissioner Nafisi,
Yes.
Commissioner Min,
Yes.
Chair Simpson.
Yes. Okay, takes care of the consent calendar. Now, this is a time in the agenda for public comment on anything you want to talk about that's not on the agenda. So is there anything anyone in the audience would like to address us about that is not on the agenda? Yes, please. Up to the...
There's been a food truck parking on North Alberta the last week or so. Not every day, but it parks there usually after school. And it's such a small street and it's residential, and I just want to bring attention to it. I don't think that should be allowed.
Okay, all right.
Excuse me, can you state your name for the, can you state your name? I'm sorry, just for,
Girl.
I'm sorry? Kate Romero, okay.
thank you.
Any other comments? Yes, please. Again, this is for something not on the agenda, right?
Hi there, I'm Mandy Warchola. I live on Maria. One of the things that we're having a lot of problems with is the alley behind Maria. Is how there's never been a major accident there, I'll never know. But when we come out, there's parking allowed on Burrell. And when we edge forward, we can't see the oncoming traffic because of all the cars that are parked. On the other side of the alley, which comes out on Cornelian, Diamond, the curbs are red, so there's no cars allowed to park there. So if we could have red curbs between Maria and Paulina, stopping cars parking there, or at least stopping half of the block, we'll be able to see the oncoming traffic easier. Because if there's a huge RV parked or a van or something, we have to literally move our cars right out, edge out into the middle where we can be hit by the oncoming traffic.
Okay, thank you.
Does staff have enough information from that to?
Catch the blocks.
I believe it was the alley behind Maria over by Beryl Heights Elementary School.
500, 600 block.
Maria and Paulina.
This is, we'll refer that to staff at the appropriate time to investigate. Any other comments on things not on the agenda? Well, then, let us proceed to, what are we looking at? We don't have any items from previous agendas. So it is now items for discussion prior to action. And it's J1, a U-turn restriction on 600 block of North Maria Avenue. I suspect there's a presentation on that.
There is indeed. Good evening, Commissioners and Chairman Simpson.
So I need to step out because I live within 500 feet of this proposed sign, so I have to step out because I have to recuse myself, so just FYI.
Okay.
I know, I didn't know either.
Yeah, that's, if it's within 500 feet is the, yeah, okay.
Did she actually have to step out?
Good evening, Commissioners. I'll be making a short presentation tonight regarding this item, which is consideration of a U-turn restriction on the 600 block of North Maria Avenue. On the screen before you is just an overhead view of the block in question. The 600 block is indicated there by the red bracket. You'll note Beryl Heights Elementary School directly across the street from that block. And the school is also surrounded by Beryl Street, North Lucia, and Carnelian Street. This map is similar. It's just taken away the photo. It's just the outline of the streets and the blocks. And the issue that's before us is vehicles traveling southbound on Maria away from Beryl towards Carnelian when they are dropping off and picking up kids at school, parking at the curb, loading or unloading, and then departing. There's a frequency of U-turn movements in that block for southbound vehicles making a U-turn, heading back northbound, presumably to get to Beryl Street and for access to their points beyond. A preferred circulation indicated by these arrows would be to direct traffic around the block instead of making the U-turn on Maria. The school principal reached out to one of the commissioners and eventually to us. Our traffic engineer was out, met with him several times on site and observed. And I'll let Merdad answer specific questions about that if you have them. But considerable amount of congestion builds when during these drop-off pickup times. There's obviously children sometimes crossing the street mid-block. And so the U-turns just creates a little bit of congestion and perhaps even chaos at times in terms of cars blocking the street, or it's exacerbated by the fact that there's parking on both sides of the road permitted here. And so potentially 3-point type U-turns rather than a smooth U-turn would come into play and create further problems. And so the request from the school principal actually, and I don't know if Mr. Stern is here. He did send an email, which is in the folder, stating his request was to restrict U-turns on school days only for southbound Maria, preventing them from making that movement, and instead kind of following the green arrow as I presented here. You could also consider a restriction for vehicles traveling northbound, preventing them from making a U-turn into the southbound direction. It didn't seem to be as big a problem when it was observed. The days we were there, we didn't hear that from the principal, but that is an obvious question to ask. Would that also be an improvement to circulation in this area? So just a couple of graphics here. The alternatives that staff has put before you, and certainly anything else you might determine, would be to install a U-turn restriction for the southbound traffic, school days only, to install that restriction as well as a northbound restriction for school days only, or deny the U-turn restriction request altogether, or as I mentioned, any other action as you might determine appropriate. So that's the end of my report. I believe there's a number of people here in the audience as well, so happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions?
Not for me. Yeah, where's the button to, where's the question? Yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick question about restricting the southbound movement. Will the signs be placed throughout the mid-block? Will there be one singular point, or is it just going to be like a couple of signs throughout the whole block?
Yeah, Redondo, would you maybe go to the podium and respond to that? I know you've been out there and located good locations.
Good evening, Commissioner. Actually, when I drove the area, it's Maria between Cornelian and Beryl. It's about 670, 680 feet long block. The southbound, the entire block is the school site. So it will only affect the schools and not the residents. And initially I was thinking of installing one sign at the beginning of the block, one where the gate is, which is midway, almost closer than midway, where the gate is and the school children get dropped off at that point. So I was thinking of installing one adjacent to the gate and one at the end of the block. But this restriction will also be applied on school days only. So during non-school days, there is no restriction. And I personally drove it 2 or 3 different days, and I did not see that many violations for the northbound traffic, but the principal, Mr. Stern, indicated to me that he also notices, he's there every day, so I believe him that there are occasional drivers who also make that U-turn from the residential side, they make a U-turn. But I really don't see that happening a lot because they would prefer to go to Beryl, which is a major street, and just get out of the area.
One quick question. One of the things here said that should only be applied, it shouldn't affect the 500 block of Maria. It doesn't, does it? I mean, you're not proposing covering the.
No, this is the
it's just
entire 600 block of,
That's what I thought.
the 600 block only. The 500 block will not be affected.
One other question. Why not just make it a permanent no U-turn thing? Why only?
It's up to the community. If they want it permanent, we'll make it permanent.
Okay.
Thank you.
That does make me think of a question too, in terms of the traffic is obviously affected because of the children being dropped off at school. School days, Monday through Friday, presumably, excluding holidays and whatnot. But what about hour restrictions, like 7 a.m. to 4 p.m.?
I can ask Mr. Stern, I think they get off at 2:30.
2:30, yeah.
Like school days from 7 a.m. to, let's say, 4 p.m. That would be an option too, if my boss agrees.
So, okay, perhaps something we'll
That could be
discuss
an option too.
when we deliberate.
But
Yeah.
the street is very narrow, and the residential side, they don't have the houses don't have too many, only one driveway for one car,
Right.
so it's really blocked, and the cars are parked all day long. So whoever wants to make southbound, make a U-turn to go northbound, they have to go forward, back. It really creates traffic jam and traffic problems.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Chairperson Simpson, if I can add to what Mr. Mukhtar is saying, is yes, not only can you consider that to be restricted on school days, but you can further restrict that to the certain hours of the day. So that could be the morning drop-off and the afternoon pickup, or either of those situations. You're not locked into just an entire day, no U-turn restriction.
Okay.
Makes sense.
I suspect we may have some public comment on this. Please come forward.
We have cards first.
Do we have cards?
There are cards, but none for this item.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Mandy Warchola again. I live on the 600 block directly opposite the gate of the school. I just want to talk about a couple of issues we have, what it'll mean to us by you implementing this policy, a couple of questions we have, and a couple of suggestions us residents have. And I'm really talking for the neighbor on both sides of me. So we sort of got together and came up with a little list we wanted to run by you.
All right, please.
So some of the issues we have is, and some of these are relevant, some of them not, but on school days, we are unable to park in front of our houses because it seems like the faculty of the school park there all day long. So many of us, we just have to go into the alley, and if we do go into the alley and we don't have garage space, we get ticketed. So that part is quite tough for us. The majority, we're not sure about who's the majority of people making these U-turns, but us residents, we do make U-turns. And it's, especially because the school occupies the whole block on the west side. So on the east side, we come through there and we do U-turns ourselves. On the loading zone, what happens is many of the parents are dropping off their kids and then they're lingering there, which then impedes the rest of the traffic. So they're lingering, they're watching their children, they're having conversations across the street to each other, and that definitely slows down the flow. So by implementing this, us residents will be restricted from doing this during school hours, from making U-turns or the entire day, however long you guys decide that that sign needs to be valid for. The people are going to be turning around on the only driveway on the 600 block, which is 616 North Maria. It's the only driveway there. So people are already using that. And the poor homeowner there, he's got no control over that, but everyone does their U-turn into that driveway. So a couple of questions. Will the U-turn policy be enforced the whole school day or just drop off and pick up times as that gentleman suggested? And what about events such as school nights, when they have movie nights and events at the school? Because then all the parking in the entire area is taken. All across Maria, down Burrell, there's absolutely no parking in sight. Will there be citations? If yes, how much, what will these citations be? How much will they be and who's going to enforce it? Is parking going to enforce it, but it would be a moving violation? So in that case, the police would enforce it. What other alternatives are there to us having a no U-turn sign on the 600 block? And I think you guys did mention that you were thinking about no U-turns on both sides of the street. It seems like most of the U-turns are made on the west side. A number of us residents feel a good way to go would be to require parking permits on the 600 block or to make Maria a one-way street. And what other alternatives are there to resolve congestion issues? Perhaps a drop-off zone on Beryl, enforcing the loading zone, no parking or lingering around there, and perhaps developing more spots for faculty so that they're not using up the North Maria valuable area. Even when we're not there, if the faculty comes, they park there, there's nowhere for the parents really to drop their kids off unless they just hover in the middle of the street. A final suggestion would be a letter to the parents asking them not to do U-turns and not to have the city ticket these people, but rather format it in a letter to help the parents understand that the actions affect our neighborhood and the people who live there. And that's it. Sorry, it was lengthy. Okay.
Any other comments? Please.
We have a microphone too if you need. Oh, I know, I'm sorry.
Okay. Hi, I'm Sherry James. I'm at 610 Maria.
I was shocked to see this letter because I live right there, like almost at Carnelian. I mean, I guess I see people sometimes, go into Carnelian and turn around, but I really don't see this happening much, except by me. Parking on that side of the street, I don't ever want to go to Burrell and Maria. Now that Burrell has shrunk down there by the store and stuff, it backs up. It'll be 10, 15 cars there, and then 10 or 15 more cars on Burrell. I do everything to avoid that intersection. And I work in Torrance, so I work the opposite direction. So if I'm going to be forced to have to now sit in line there, to try to make a right turn on Paulina, or which I'm not even supposed to do, or Prospect, that adds 20 more minutes to my day. Like, I don't have it. So like one more thing to make it work for the school, and it's basically, it's not going to help the neighborhood, it's not going to help the homeowners. What's going to help the homeowners is thinking about us for a change. The principal can tell the parents, don't do it. What we want you guys to do is to do the loop that he's talking about. I think that's a great idea. Do the loop that makes a right turn on Carnelian. Heck, there's a gate at Carnelian and Lucia that hasn't been opened in, I've been there 25 years. I've never seen it open. Affect somebody else. Like Maria gets it all. We get dumped on, we get all the parents, we get all the teachers, we get all the CDC, our cars get dinged up every day. We get stuck in. I come home, I'm handicapped right now. I come home with a car full of groceries and I can't even park in front of my house because somebody's sitting there waiting for the school to end to pick up their kid. Like, I ask you to think about us, the people that live there. I asked this principal to think about us, the people that live there. He has control over his teachers. They have control over the CDC. They can have a conversation. They have control with the parents. Don't do it anymore. Don't do the U-turns. You must drop off and you must make a right on Carnelian and then get the heck out of here. Like, I think the principal can do that. He can help enforce it. As far as U-turns anyhow, like, honestly, I don't even think they're legal to start with. I think it's illegal anyhow, and now we're going to have something to enforce it being illegal, and I think it's truly going to be more effect on the homeowners than it is the school.
How is it going to affect the homeowners? Do you all make U-turns there?
I do, yeah. Granted, I'm going north. As I said, I'm getting the heck out of it. I don't want to go to Burrell and Maria. I want to stay away from that any chance I get during the school day, morning and afternoon. It's an ugly traffic situation made worse now by what they've done to Burrell. They've narrowed the street going down, I guess it would be going east. They've narrowed the street. You get a backup on Maria, which is between the narrowing the Burrell and now there being 10 or 12 cars on Maria trying to make a right turn on Burrell or a left turn, whatever turn. And now on Burrell, you get a backup from Prospect because at Prospect, it all goes down into one lane now. So you can be 15, 20 minutes for me to get on Maria, to get down to Burrell, to get to Prospect, to go to work.
When you make your U-turn, where are you going with a U-turn?
If I'm on Maria, I'm going north.
Right?
I'm making a U-turn and going down to Diamond.
South,
So I'm going south, yeah.
which is the opposite direction that we're actually considering the restriction.
You're talking
but I
now
appreciate,
about both.
Yeah, we are. Yeah.
And this, I didn't really get that or at least the letter that we got that it was just no U-turn. So to come here and hear that maybe you could do it north, I'm happy to hear that. But still, U-turn or no U-turn, if you can just keep the parents going, like the principal can ask that. The principal can help enforce it. And I think it's a great idea. But also to have him enforce drop-off somewhere other than on Maria. Have different grades dropped off at different places. Use that gate at Carnelian and Lucia. There's gates at all 4 areas around that school. Use them. Like,
Why Maria all the time? We get all the traffic from the events at the school. We get traffic every morning from the school. We get traffic every afternoon. We get traffic now at night. Like, good Lord, help. So again, the principal being the one that brought this up, I think the principal can enforce and help a lot of it himself, and help us by just asking or enforcing his teachers and the parents. Like I think he can go to them and help this tremendously. You just got to do it. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other comments? Yes, please.
Hi, good evening. My name is Daniel Lasdow. I live on Guadalupe, North Guadalupe. I work for LAUSD in Harbor City, and I'm a coordinator. I've been there for 23 years. Our school is a similar situation where we have the entire block is the school. And our principal has changed the entrance gate several times over the last 7 or 8 years. We had it on one street, then for some reason we didn't like that. We changed it to the front of the school, the traditional entrance, and then we changed it to the other side to try something different to affect the flow of traffic. We have similar issues at our school, and I can see how the principal can be creative and make those decisions by opening a different gate. It can be suggested to the principal, and it's his decision, his or her decision to do that. And that would be a creative way that the school could handle its own issue. Because it is possible. It doesn't have to involve the city necessarily. The principal can do that himself. So.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Further discussion? Yeah.
I've got a bunch of questions maybe for staff. So I'm looking at the street view and it looks like there's already a parking restriction for 7:30 to 4 p.m. on Maria on the school side. And that seems to be, excessive. I can understand having a parking restriction for the drop-off pickup times, but in between, it seems like people should be allowed to park along there. And that could alleviate some of the parking issues in front of these people's homes throughout the day, and people dropping off maybe after in the evening in the CDC after 4 p.m. That's one question. Is that parking restriction still there? It's based on the street view a while. It's okay.
That was made for when they had sort of a valet parking. When our son was there, we had a valet, the parents did a valet parking. So they're trying to get people to just drop kids off and to not stay. And I think that's why that's there. I don't think they do that anymore. So all the more reason to open it up.
So my second question is exactly what the lady just mentioned. Is there a valet parking program? It seems like that's something that should be done as part of the school's operations as a first step, to trying to keep cars moving. And that, I know our school has it in Washington, that they have parent volunteers, they have teachers, staffers, just keeping people going, throughout the morning, just so it doesn't back up, throughout the parking lots and the streets. It just feels like there may be some solutions proposed that could be better than just doing a U-turn restriction. Another thing, I do think the principal should put out some education to the parents and to the school before we do any kind of restrictions, just to let them know that this is a problem and for them to keep going and not to make U-turns, and maybe have occasional enforcement from the police department. Maybe not every day, that's probably excessive, but maybe once in a while. And because if someone's making a dangerous U-turn or a 3-point turn or 5-point turn, however it takes, that's, especially in front of a school when there's kids all over the place, that's kind of a safety concern. I understand why the principal would have that concern. That could be easily enforced, and once someone gets a ticket once or twice, they're not going to do it again. So I guess my question is, have those options been considered first? Trying to establish a valet program, trying to work with the principal and school to educate the parents on the circulation, like the proposed circulation that you showed us on the slide. And why is there a parking restriction, for the full day there, when it seems like maybe you only need it for the 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the afternoon. So, That would be helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
I think only the principal can answer those questions. I don't know what he's done in the past, whether he's tried some of the solutions that you mentioned, and I agree with you. And, some of the crossing guards, I think they have crossing guards. Maybe they can kind of act like a person to say, no, you can go straight. And, what I can do is, I did ask him to come here tonight, and I don't see him in this place right now. I can meet with him and just have a discussion with him, what we discussed, and the suggestions and the neighbors suggested, and see what he says, and we can take it from there.
Right. It feels like we just need to do a little bit more planning on, I guess, to develop some kind of circulation plan for the morning and pick up drop-offs, which could include multiple things. Maybe U-turn is one of the things we consider, but seems like there are other things that could be considered as well before we just, approve a U-turn. I understand that that's kind of a request from the principal, and but if, as you heard, it seems like there's definitely some other unintended consequences from that.
Right.
So I'm inclined to really try those options first and have a meeting with the principal, develop maybe just a very simple circulation plan that could be distributed to parents. I know when our principal emails us and say, hey, stop doing the stupid behavior in front of our school in the mornings, I definitely see an improvement, at least for a short term. And again, people revert back to their behaviors, but a reminder on a weekly or monthly basis from the principal makes a big difference, I think.
Yep.
But that's my inclination for now, but I'm happy to hear other questions or other discussion.
Other comments or thoughts?
Well, I'd like to chime in if I may. I have a question of the community. Is the traffic light at Burrell on the corner there, is it still manned by, there was a lady that used to help the kids cross the street at the, so that's a crossing guard. That's what I'm looking for. So there's still a crossing guard there. Obviously, it would be the police department would be the only body that can enforce anything like this. And I can tell you, all the years I've been on the commission and involved in our school district as well, that traffic circulation has always been a problem, more and more. I mean, most of us in this room probably walked to school or rode our bikes, but our kids get chauffeured. So, which obviously has increased the traffic around the schools. I'm kind of inclined, I made note that the principal's letter to us is dated January 20th, just a few days ago. And so because he's not here, we're not able to ask what other discussion has there been. I mean, PTA is very active. We know they're crossing guard. We know that there are entities that could probably look at it better than even we could as a commission, as to should there be multiple drop-off points? Should there be one, on the west side of the school? I mean, there's obviously some more options that need to be discussed further before we just do a hard no U-turn. And we've also raised some other issues in terms of, maybe loosening up some of the parking restrictions. I mean, obviously, it's kind of a given that the street along a school will be restricted from parking, although dropping off is pretty standard, but restricted from parking from 7 to 9 or, whatever the drop off and pickup times are. And sometimes it's warranted restricting it in between, throughout the entire school day. But I know that stretch, and I know obviously that it's full of residential directly across the street, and I can imagine what the parking is like there. So anyway, I'm kind of, obviously one of our options is to really not request anything be done as a result of our meeting this evening, and really, dare I say, put it back on the principal and the school. But I'll put it out there too. Obviously, as community members, whether your kids are still at the school or not, we're grateful that you've come down to speak to us because it's agendized. It's a big item. But I would encourage you to obviously, in fact, and I think we should communicate to the principal to perhaps have a little community meeting to, where the brainstorming could be done right there on site to come up with some ideas. So, Commissioner Min, I'm kind of inclined like you to kind of, send it back to local and see what they might be able to come up with before we do anything rash. Thank you.
Commissioner Bajaj?
Yeah, I'm looking at the Google Maps Street View as well, and I see the parking restrictions and so forth. But in my head, I'm kind of separating the parking issues from the southbound U-turn. Because I see the southbound U-turn on a residential street and, the fact that there's not a lot of driveways, so now most of the drivers are making a 3-point turn. And parking or no parking, I think people are going to do it just because it's the most convenient thing for parents to turn around and get out of there. So I know that there's an intention to look at circulation patterns and all of these other, parking restrictions around the school. But I look at the southbound U-turn as almost like a standalone request solely for like the safety and maneuverability of the vehicles on that street.
I'm inclined to share that point of view, I think. I mean, it seems we were talking about having the principal educate the parents and so on, but I mean, it seems to me if you have a rule in place, you can educate them about that. And
I think even if the cars were moving and, there's not gridlock on the street, those who want to turn around and make that, southbound U-turn to make it convenient to get out of the area will still do so.
And unless there's a curb in it, it seems to me so. So, anybody care to make any particular kind of a motion?
You know what, and even before we started deliberating, I had this thought, we're so used to putting permanent signs. We ask often, what's the stop sign cost? Or what's the permanently installed sign? And yet, as I drive around Redondo Beach, I'll see these portable tent kind of signs that pop up on school days in front of the school. And so I almost, it's an education of the parents dropping their kids off. And I started thinking, well, yes, they could put something out through their newsletter, through whatever the kids take home to inform the parents, whatever communication the teachers and principal can put out to the student body. But they could also put up 2 of their own little signs that just said, no U-turn. Now, that's not official or formal, I suppose, and probably wouldn't meet the traffic requirements, but it would be a strong encouragement to everyone driving to not make a U-turn if you're facing southbound, to not make a U-turn to head back the opposite direction. So I'm just thinking, again, that's something that we would then put on the school, though, instead of an actual permanent sign.
But many years ago, I used to do these safe routes to school planning exercises, and that was always one of the solutions, is to have the school have temporary A-frames or, cones, and they just set them up in the morning, they take them down. Usually parent volunteers are doing that. In some schools, they don't have a lot of volunteers, and so it's a little bit more difficult. But I think in this case, given that, this request came from the principal, he should look for some solutions within the school body, I guess, and membership there first, before asking the city to kind of do these kinds of restrictions.
Well, it seems to me that if it would be appropriate for the principal to get some of these A-frame signs that say no U-turn, right? But then you have to have it, it would be up to him to get those signs up, but you'd still have to have the regulation in place, I think, before you could put the signs up.
Right.
Which we would have to recommend doing, I think.
Well, we can deliberate on some language on this, how to maybe achieve that goal. One of the things we could request is have the city provide maybe a couple A-frames with a couple signs on them, or work with the principal on a plan of some sort. So, hey, look, it could be a very simple plan. This is how we should circulate here, where you could put the signs, and have the PTA or another student or an organization within the school work with the parents on volunteering once a year or something like that.
Yeah, okay.
I was a watchdog, and I used to do that once or twice a year. I'd go out there and I'd do this kind of thing as well. So it feels like there's
approaching the point where we may have a motion here.
Looks like someone wants to provide more comments.
Doc?
I just wanted to say, without walking up again, that as you're saying, to put it back on the principal, because he's the one who's had this concern.
Yeah, that gets recorded and goes into the record. Go ahead,
I'm
please.
definitely in favor of putting it back on the principal, because he's the one who's brought this up. You didn't get it from the neighbors that we're having U-turn issues. This is something that's coming from the principal. So to put it back on him, I live there, I don't see it. So I don't know what he's seeing, but to put it, but I do think he has a great idea about maybe forcing traffic to make a right on Carnelian and go around.
But
Once
that-
again, that's
that's
something
what
he
the
could do.
signs would do, I think. I mean, if a regulation saying no U-turns during certain hours would be precisely what made the traffic pattern that you want to have happen. I think.
Yeah, but it just, does that need to be, I'm liking your ideas of just putting signs up, during then, your little A-frame signs or whatever. But I'm just saying, put it back on him.
But I mean, if you can't put signs up unless there's a regulation in place. I mean, that's what I think is the issue here. So where are we? Anybody got some thoughts on where we should go with this?
I mean, I can give a shot and a motion.
Chairperson Simpson, if I may though, we cannot encourage people to put up signs or A-frames in the public right-of-way. That becomes a liability for the city. They may do that on the school property. They may zip tie things to the fence of the school, but we do not encourage anyone to install signs in the public right-of-way.
We hadn't gone there yet.
I just wanted to make sure before the motion is being made.
I don't think I want to go there yet with details. I think my motion would be somewhere along the lines of instructing or recommending staff work with the principal on developing a circulation plan and parent education plan to address the safety concerns that the principal obviously has with U-turns at the school along Maria. So something along those lines before we start making specific recommendations. So
Well, I mean, he has apparently done some study on this and has made a request that a U-turn prohibition be enacted, right? And you're saying go back and study it some more?
I don't think the principal is a traffic engineer. And so I don't think the principal, he needs to have some input from our traffic engineer with recommendations on different circulations. Options, including potentially changing location of drop-off pickups, different kinds of methods that can be looked at to improve circulation. Right now, there's just one spot. Maybe there could be two spots, depending on the school site, depending on traffic factors and, circulation and parking and all that stuff. It probably makes a big difference in what can be proposed. So to me, without the principal's comments specifically here tonight, and without some clear resistance from the residents across the street from the school, a U-turn specifically seems to be kind of like a one-shot sort of solution. So.
Do we have a motion?
So I can make a motion to have staff work with the principal on developing a circulation plan that could include multiple options, but I'm happy to hear suggestions.
I have a question. Is that okay, Chair Simpson? I was under the impression that the community and the principal have already met and we're sort of on the same page on this. If I'm misunderstanding the situation,
That's the point.
then perhaps it would be worthwhile for then the principal and the community to have one more follow-up meeting and see if there's, something to bring us where there's some sort of happy medium.
And I'll jump in and add as well that from reading the letter, I did not presume that there was any public outreach. I mean, but I'm not going to dispute there's an issue there. If the principal says there's an issue and he probably has seen some close calls, I'm not going to dispute that. Let's just agree that there've probably been some close calls and that have freaked some parents out and scared some kids. And the principal's trying to do the right thing. But there probably has not been enough discussion amongst that group. And if there's no parents here screaming, why is there not a U-turn? You see, that's what I was kind of anticipating when I saw a group like room this size, that there would be parents in outrage, not what we're hearing tonight. So I think it's legitimate that we send it back to the principal. And
Let's get the motion.
yeah, so I will make a motion that we deny the request for a U-turn restriction and we encourage the principal of Beryl Heights to seek further input from the neighbors and parents, student parents.
Input on what? On what to do?
Well, yeah, for them to discuss some further solutions. If I think if it's communicated to parents that are dropping their kids off to not do U-turns, that's one step in the right direction. We all know that's not a guarantee that a parent's going to do that. All right, we know parents don't listen to that kind of stuff if they even get the notice. So I want to be realistic, but I'm not even assured that they've tried that, which is why I'm hesitant to just jump in and put a U-turn.
Did not staff examine the site and determine that it would be beneficial to implement?
Yes, but I didn't even, was it observed? You observed it during school hours even. Yeah, and that's that part I recall.
Yeah, but
So-
observing some bad behavior and simply suggesting a quick solution.
This is Mildad Mushtar, the traffic engineer with City of Redondo Beach. I observed it one day, and I did not see those many violations as the principal had mentioned to me, but I did see a few cars making a U-turn for the southbound. But going back to number of solutions, personally, like maybe the no U-turn will be from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. or 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. And from whatever the dismissal is in the afternoon, let's say from 2 to 3 p.m. So only 2 hours of U-turn restriction could also be considered. That would not really heavily affect the residents. And the summertime, there's no restrictions, there's no school, there's no sign. So that could also be considered.
I would be inclined to go that route, but based on.
Well, I've made a motion. Do I have a second?
Is there a second for?
I'll second motion. The only thing if you could add is, what you discussed in terms of the principal working with the community and the parents, but also maybe with advice from the city traffic engineer, essentially, if necessary. But I'm happy to second your motion.
Chairperson, if I may, Commissioner Funabashi, would it be a denial of the U-turn restriction request today, for now?
Yes.
And have the principal work with the community for alternate solutions, explore other options, and 3 months, 6 months, whatever time, if that comes up again, then they may reapproach us, but it's a denial of the U-turn restrictions at this time with the recommended measures that you expected, right?
Yes.
And you seconded that?
I'll second the motion.
No, I guess we need a roll call vote on that,
Unless there's any more discussion.
unless there's more discussion.
So Commissioner Bajaj,
Yes.
Commissioner Funabashi,
Yes.
Commissioner Min,
Yes.
Chair Simpson.
I'm going to vote no because I think we should have done something different, but,
I respect that.
so I guess it passes.
Yes. All right.
All right.
All right. Commissioner Nafisi can come back into the room, I guess. And we are now, where are we now?
We are on J2,
I guess?
On over to Hilberta.
Why am I not getting the right spot here on the? Presentation.
Thank you.
Commissioner Simpson. So it's on you.
Call the item.
I'm sorry? Wait,
J2, we're ready to
where
proceed.
did you go? I'm sorry.
Yes.
We are ready. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. I was waiting for your signal after.
Waiting for the.
Okay, very good. This next item before you is exploration of options for improvements to circulation on the 500 block of North Alberta. This item was presented to us by the council member for this district due to traffic conflicts, if you will, on North Alberta Avenue between Diamond Street and Carnelian. Overhead view map here on the screen. He approached staff who considered some alternatives and developed 3 options, and we were directed to present these options to the community and the surrounding area, just kind of a survey to determine support for each of these options, a couple of permutations on 2 of the options as you go through. The essential issue is that the street width here is only about 30 feet wide, and there's a center line stripe which divides the roadway into a northbound and a southbound area. However, with parking on each side, which occupies 7 to 8 feet of roadway width, if you subtract, say, 7 feet twice from 30, you're down to 16 feet. And if that remaining space is split in half by a center line, you only have 8-foot lanes, which is well below our standard of 10.5 to 12-foot lanes. So it creates a conflict for oncoming traffic, trying to obey the center line alignment and the parked cars and each other. And so this is the basis of our conflict here on this street. Shown here just in a section view, and this is my attempt at graphic design, so I apologize. IR engineer. So anyway, but this shows the 30 feet width and 7 feet and the 16 feet, just a little more graphically. The options, or the alternatives rather, that we came up with and presented in the survey would be to eliminate parking on one side of the street or the other. We've done this in multiple locations, especially in the northern part of the city. And that creates space, gives you back 7 feet at least to create two-way traffic. We'd move the center line over to be in the middle roughly of the portion of the roadway that wasn't designated for parking. Another option would be to establish a one-way traffic flow through this block. That would allow parking to remain on both sides of the street. I would get rid of the center line, of course, and just establish which direction we'd prefer traffic to go. And then the final option would be just to simply eliminate the center line, which is kind of the low-tech solution that we presented. Interesting, we got survey results back from a number of people kind of outlined in this golden area. One way are indicated that those who preferred one way and returned their surveys to us are indicated with the green markings. The blue indicates those who prefer to eliminate parking, and the red to remove the center line. And the raw numbers are a little bit hard to see down at the bottom. We have blue, square, and triangle. The square is eliminate parking on the west side. The triangle is eliminate parking on the east side. That was in a ratio of 4-to-1. 5 of the total 43 results that we got back were blue. The vast majority was the green, the choice of green to create one-way parking, and most of those elected the northbound direction. And then a significant portion, about a quarter, preferred to keep the status quo with the removal of the center line. So that's graphically depicted. I'm showing it here also in percentages. 11.6% was the least preferred option to eliminate parking on either side. Establishing one-way traffic was the favorite with almost 63%, and 3/4 of those essentially preferred the northbound direction, and then eliminating the center line, again, about 25%. I did look at those who are on the block itself. The percentages are about the same. Eliminate parking on one side was just one of the 14 on that block who responded. All of those who responded to establish one-way traffic preferred the traffic to go northbound, and again, that was the vast majority. And then about 20% eliminating the center line. So the recommendations before you, and I will say, learning from the last item, that we were asked to do a survey prior to doing much study, traffic circulation overall, just to gauge public interest in any of these options before we invested that kind of time in an area-wide traffic study. So the alternatives that we're putting before you tonight are to eliminate parking, recommend that we move forward with looking at eliminating parking on one side of the street. We prefer you tell us which side. and modify the center line, or maintain parking in both directions and establish, on both sides of the street and establish one-way traffic flow. Please again state the direction you prefer us to look at. And then, or the other would be to eliminate the center line and otherwise leave things as it is. That one wouldn't necessarily require us to come back to you. We would just take care of that through our operations team in the field, or any other options or direction as you may provide for us tonight.
Just to clarify, if we vote for, if we adopt either the first two options, then you go and do a formal study?
We would probably need to do more. We would eventually go to the city council, and prior to our visit to the city council, we want to do a little bit more homework on this for either one of those options.
Along the lines of number of cars that go through, or?
I'm going to defer to my traffic engineers on the exact nature of the study, but we would want to spend a little more time in the field than we have already. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Questions?
I think it might be nice if we had public comment first.
All
Before we
right.
ask questions,
Let's,
just to
let's
hear
go
what
to
everyone's
public
opinions.
comment. Do we have cards?
Yes, we have 2 cards so far. We have got John and Maria Stefan.
My name is Maria Stefan. I live at 519 North Alberta. And to eliminate the one side of the street with the parking, that would be hard for people that have more than one car. My preference and our family preference would be to make a one-way street. Then we can have parking on each side and the traffic will be better and the students will, our car was hit a few times parking on the side because 4 cars do not have enough room to drive either way. So it's a very difficult time for us to have every morning when the students go to school, and that's the most traffic it is over there. And being new drivers and the street is not totally straight, it's kind of curved, it makes it very difficult. So that's my opinion. If we were gonna do it, to have a one-way street, whichever way it goes, as long as it does not eliminate the parking on the sides. We're family with many cars, and where would we park the cars then?
Do you have a preference as to which way would be one?
I would prefer to go north, but I'm okay either way,
Okay,
as long as we have the parking saved. Thank you.
all right, thank you. Another card?
We have Steve Bopp.
Oh, Steve.
Don't get old, you get
Hi,
dizzy.
Steve.
Hi. My thoughts, eliminate the line in the center. Let that go for a while, see how it works out. They talk about traffic. I live on North Gertruda. I get the school traffic. They talk about traffic. I live on North Gertruda. I get the school traffic in the afternoon more than in the morning. They double park, they block my driveway, they block Diamond. I've called the police. They don't enforce anything because they're only there for 15 minutes and then they're gone. The days when we went to school, we walked. Now it's like everybody's got, and what is it? It's not Toledo anymore. Is it Toledo? It's not Paris. They run up and down Prospect. They double park there too. It's the way that we're living now. I'd hate to see you do a one-way street. That's not far north Redondo. That's what they've done over there because of the narrow streets. But that's my thought. Eliminate the line and run like that for a while, see what works out. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have Susan Poland.
Hi, I didn't get to vote, but I felt like I was forced into voting for something I didn't want any of those. I don't know what other options. I mean, I think over the years, there's definitely a problem. We've had many cars sideswiped, mirrors taken off. It's been a real problem. But we've thought of things like those bumps in the road, or maybe, to me, it's more the speed is the biggest issue, and of course, the space. Parents go too fast and then they can't determine how much space they have. I've been living there since 1995, and I just do not want a one-way street. I mean, I think it could eliminate the problem, but I think the high school, it's mostly during the school times when it's the problem. And I also think the high school could do a better job of having their drop-off places too, because even the other side of the high school, they have some really nice circular areas that I never see cars in those areas. And those would be really nice drop-off places if they could. Maybe they used to be a drop-off place many years ago, I don't know. But other ideas would be like, maybe don't turn from coming down Carnelian, not to turn left, or not to go down Alberta maybe at certain hours, or like those bumps, or just, or maybe the center line. Maybe I like that guy's idea about taking the center line out. I don't know if that would really change the spacing there, but it might make people think, they would, I don't know, might help a little bit. But I just feel like there's maybe some different options that could be thought about before making it a one-way street.
Okay, thank you. Another one, Laura?
So, yes, Michael McKierney?
Hi, my name is Michael McNerney. I'm at 505 North Alberta. I work out in my garage almost every morning, so I see the traffic that happens. Center line would do absolutely nothing. I'd say almost every week, I see cars get hit. Cars in front of my house. There was a neighbor across the street from me. His car got hit twice. Now, honestly, it's just a mirror, right? But these people drive away. The only real option is either making it a one-way street or and perhaps making it during school hours, like during drop-offs. So it's every one of these options is annoying, right? Making it one-way street is annoying. But you know what's more annoying is getting your car hit. I have a neighbor who won't park on Alberta. They park on Diamond because the street's too narrow. So eliminating a center line doesn't make the street any wider. The problem is when you've got parents that are harried and trying to drop their kids off, trying to go in both directions. You have to yield. There's no option. So the center line doesn't make the street wider. It doesn't make lack of a need to yield to the other driver. And you've got brand new drivers who can't maneuver. They don't know the width of their car. So the only thing that really works is a one-way street. I'm somewhat agnostic, but I think going from Diamond to Alberta eliminates the speeders coming down Carnelian and doing 40 miles an hour and turning left onto Alberta. Like, that's a problem too. And maybe we do it such that it's a one-way street only during school hours, because that will alleviate a lot of us having to be annoyed and going around the street, when we get home from work. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is it Neva Valentini?
Hi. Okay, I live right on the corner of North Irena and Alberta, in the house right on the corner, with all the traffic coming down and seeing on Alberta going to the high school. I've been there 6 years. I sometimes take my cell phone in the living room and think I'm gonna send something to you guys, because it's like an anthill, like a fast anthill. Zoom, 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 zoom. People honking. Every morning, people are honking at each other. No people can hardly walk across. Kids are trying to walk across their books or something. It's honk, 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 get out of the way. And they all zoom down Alberta. And I used to live on Alberta a long time ago. I know it's a narrow street. but they're not going to go down Carnelian. They're going to go to Alberta to go to the high school to be dropped off, or either their car. So I think the one line has nothing to do with anything. I think if you have to have a one-way, that you should let the people in Alberta choose which way. But I do think that coming out of Alberta for the parents is going to be much worse, because then they're going to face the traffic uphill. And then I think that it's hard to decide, but I think the traffic has to go through Alberta, unfortunately, to get to the school. Otherwise, they're going to reroute up to the next street, Irina, to try to get to the front of the school or go around. Anyhow, it's a madhouse, and I've almost wanted to invite all of you to my house to watch in the morning tonight, and you're welcome too, if you want to do that. Anybody can do that. But it's a madhouse. So something has to be done. The middle line's not going to do anything.
So you're advocating a one-way?
I am saying it should be up to the people in Alberta, I think, which way, if it has to be one way.
But do you think it has to be one way?
But if you were coming out from the high school, the parents would have to be coming down Diamond and coming out. And then all the people coming down Carnelian are going to be honking again more and more and more, because they want to get that way. That's where they're going. They're either going on Irina or Alberta. And Irina is usually pretty backed up because it's like a cross. You have to wait at the stop, at the corners. But people come down 80 miles an hour in their bikes, their cars, everything coming down that hill. You guys need to put some traffic things going there. Slow signs, something, whatever, but.
So it does sound like our previous item. It's a school hour related issue. It's 7 to 8:30 in the morning, and
well, but there's two times now.
Yeah.
They've divided the times.
But it's still a school related issue. I mean, on the weekend, everybody on Alberta is happy campers, probably, even with the narrow street.
Wow.
But we don't have the traffic volume anywhere near on the weekends,
Okay,
right?
the traffic, but the speed is immense, and people on their bicycles, young kids, babies on bikes, whatever, coming down there, not stopping all the way as treacherous, but that's another story.
Thank you.
Sorry. That's all the cards we have for J2, but if we can invite.
Does anyone else want to speak that didn't put a card in?
Hi.
Identify yourself.
Hi, my name is Karen Corey, and my husband and I live at 502 North Alberta. And so it's the second in from Diamond. We moved there in 1996. The administration building for the school was on the other side, and we were excited about that, but then they moved it, of course, to our side. So now we are all suffering the consequences of that. And what I say is, it's not only the direction of the street, it's the parents dropping the kids off at the corner of Alberta and Diamond on both sides of and honest to God, I can't leave at a certain time in the morning. I have to wait until all the traffic is gone because I can't get out of the driveway. The parents block the driveway and block the driveways across the street. So I can't even get my car out of the driveway to go either one direction. I would prefer to have the northbound all the way up to Carnelian, because I think it would be easier. And I understand that the traffic is heavy, with the school. I don't really care if it's, all day or you cannot use this, make it a one-way street period or during certain times. And if the times, I'd make it from 6 until 6. Because the same thing happens when the school has functions like football games. We can't even get to our driveway. So this isn't just something that just happens during the daytime. It also happens in the evening and on weekends. I could go on about this, but I really prefer the one-way going north up towards Carnelian. That's it.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to make a comment?
Hi, my name is Sandy Deary. I live at 504 North Alberta. We're next door neighbors. Yeah, center divider, center line doesn't do anything. And we cannot eliminate parking. There's just not enough parking. During the school, there's no parking anywhere. We're blocks away if you have to park and you're not on that before the school starts. It is basically during school hours. Mike was right. Cars come by. We don't know how many times we do not park on Alberta. We live there and we cannot park there because we've had guests who have lost their mirrors. It happens weekly where somebody's driving through. As you've all said, there's no room. There's no room for 4 cars at once, period. It just doesn't happen. So what happens is they're coming into Alberta off a Diamond and they're coming into Alberta off a Carnelian, and someone has to stop. And so it backs up traffic. So now you have traffic backed up on Diamond because you have to stop. And then you have traffic backed up through Carnelian because they're trying to maneuver through. So you've got parking on both sides and you've got 2 cars that are trying to go in opposite directions, and it just doesn't work. So it needs to be a one-way street. When we got your letter, it said, we have to consider services. And we understand, you need the fire department, the police, when they come through, everybody comes up Diamond. It's probably easier to start from Diamond and come up Diamond into Alberta and do it that way. But we've got to eliminate the two-way traffic because there is just no way to do that. And so what happens is every time somebody's trying to get through, someone else has to stop. The other thing is there's a little hill on Alberta. So when you're coming from Carnelian or from Alberta in the middle, there's a hill and you can't actually even see what's coming. So even during hours that aren't part of school, you cannot see, you're completely blind until you get to that hill. So if you've got someone coming north and you've got someone going south, there is a part a little closer to Carnelian where you can't see anything, no matter what, until you get to that hill. So whether and then again, you're in two-way street. So that's an issue. That hill is an issue.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you. Any other comments?
Good evening. My name's Edward Deary. You just heard from my wife. Just an addition, I'm for a northbound one-way street. And one of the reasons also is for the congestion at that corner, at Alberta and Diamond. At the school hours, it's extremely busy there, as you've heard already. One of the problems, I think, if you had the traffic going in the southbound direction, you're adding a third group of traffic coming into that intersection. There are hundreds of kids being dropped off. The latest thing since September that we didn't have in previous years is I've never seen so many of the electric bikes running around, and they don't pay attention to anything at all. It's becoming very dangerous, more so than it has in past years. So I think you really need to have the traffic in one way going northbound. And again, as much as it would be an inconvenience, it really needs to be all the time. That is, especially as you get towards the middle of the street, it's extremely narrow. Again, we have children in the neighborhood. Kids come out into the street. You are kind of blinded from either direction as you get to the crest there. You can't see them, and it's too narrow, and you have no place to maneuver because sometimes you can barely get one car up through there. So I think a northbound, one-way, full-time is probably the best alternative.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please.
Hi, I'm Katie Romero, 512 North Alberta, and I don't know, maybe this is a crazy suggestion, but what about just having signs saying no throughway traffic, school drop-off traffic? No school drop-off traffic on both sides of Alberta, on the Carnelian side and on the Diamond side. Just put up signs, no throughway, don't do the school drop-off. And, during, for the whole day or just period. I don't know if that's something that would work, but if there were big signs saying no school drop-off traffic through this street. Anyway, just my idea.
Thank you. Yes.
I'm Ron Corey. I live at 502 North Alberta. And I agree with everybody, my neighbors, as far as a one-way solution. What I'd like to add to that mix is the fact that we do allow parking on both sides of the street. Most of the time, 3/4 of that is taken up by students from the high school. One of the things that I do on a daily basis is I walk our dogs and I walk them up the hill and I go across the diamond and I come down and I count the number of empty spaces in the parking lot at the school. I have yet to find less parking spaces available in the school lot than we have on our street. We have about 25 spaces normally available. That gives a little bit of cushion for the residents, but the rest of those spots are all taken up by students who would rather park on our street than pay to park at the school. And this is just one other thing for the Knicks. We need to have some parking. So I would definitely want to look at permitting parking for our street. That'll cut down on some of the issues. It's not going to eliminate it, but at least it will help. So thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a question with something you said? Do the kids pay for their parking at the school?
One day I observed 2 students getting out of their car and I was just curious enough to ask them. And that was the answer that I got. If you want to park on school parking, you have to pay for it. And then it goes, I don't know if it's a lottery or whatever, they give preference to the senior students. But they don't really seem to use that lot very much at all.
All right, thank you. Any other comments? Okay. Any discussion, commissioners?
Sure, we all do. You want?
I guess I'll go first.
Sure.
Has there been any study on travel patterns here?
No, we were just asked to provide the survey before we got to that point.
Right. So, generally, if you were to do a one-way street, we need to there may be unintended consequences on adjacent streets, right? Traffic has to go somewhere. And as the lady mentioned earlier, some of that might go on Irina as an alternate to get to the school, especially if we do a northbound. So, I can see why you would need to do more study for a one-way street option, just to make sure the unintended consequences aren't going to impact, a whole nother block of neighbors, who are probably concerned as well with the traffic in this area. I am kind of, well, my daughter's about to go to high school, and I've never heard about the paid parking solution, and she's going to have to drive because there's no, we live far enough north where walking and biking is probably not feasible. So that's one thing. We could I would suggest talking to the school, see what they can do in terms of their circulation, just like the previous item, talking with the principal and looking for some alternate solutions to educate the school body and the parents as to some. It won't solve everything here, but as one of many solutions. But I think I have other questions, but I can't think of them right now, so I'll hand it off to anyone else for the time being.
Other discussion? Commissioner Bozales?
Yeah, I think it's worthwhile to collect some volume data, and like Commissioner Min said.
Commissioner Rajaj, you got to get your microphone on, please.
All right, sorry about that. I think it's worthwhile to at least, it seems like if the community's open to a one-way, maybe to collect the data, see what the traffic volumes look like on there, because, as Commissioner Min said, some unintended consequences for 24-hour one-way could end up with, increased speeds on Hilberta if traffic is now only flowing in one direction. Or, traffic diverting onto other streets. But somebody, mentioned a part-time turn restriction. I don't know if that can be added to the discussion if this item moves forward to get the attention from the city is maybe a part-time turn restriction in conjunction with removing the center line. Could be an option.
I echo those sentiments. I do worry about if we were to change it to a one-way street, that the other streets are going to reap those impacts. So I do think we need to think about it in a holistic way to figure out what those traffic patterns are. We had a similar situation on Paulina with school traffic, and the no turn sign from a allotted time did help. One way was a no turn, I think no U-turn one way in the morning, and then they did a no turn on the same street in the afternoon, and that really kind of helped with the traffic. People still do it, but far less, they come down the street far less rates, so that might be another thing to really examine as a short-term solution. But we should be thinking, I think, more holistically about how that's going to impact the area. I mean, the high school is a big footprint, and we know what the traffic patterns kind of look like from, the daily routine, but really thinking about trying to get that traffic more along the school or on Diamond or off of the residential street. So that's what I would hope to see.
Yeah, I had a couple of things. From our staff report, I see that 293 surveys were sent out and 14.7% were returned. So we don't really have a great sample, if you will. Although it does lean very clearly, I believe, to the one-way northbound. I think as a commission, we don't like to take away parking spots. It's like a cardinal sin. Don't do that. And yet sometimes you have to for safety reasons and others, but that's certainly, that's at the bottom. And we know that removing the white line doesn't make the road any wider. If you've driven around the Hollywood Hills or other neighborhoods around, you know how crazy it can be sometimes. Just throw in a high school, like ours, and it's just going to exacerbate it. A couple of comments though that really resonated with me were just that. No, don't remove any parking if you're going to make it one way. And even those that were returned, the survey pretty much said the northbound. And a comment was made away from the school, which made sense, instead of, bringing it down to that three-way there by the administration building. But I couldn't help but think of, as Commissioner Bajaj came up with as well, a suggestion if we eliminated or we restricted turns at the top of Alberta, say at Carnelian, where you couldn't make a right or you couldn't make a left or you couldn't enter the top of Alberta, that would eliminate that southbound traffic without making it a one-way all the time. I was kind of leaning, especially by the comments that were made by those of you who are living right on the street, suggesting that it be a one-way and northbound. So part of me is kind of, if we're going to make a significant decision tonight, I think I would lean towards that one of the options. But what also, again, would want to discuss, again, the turn restrictions that could be placed up at the north end that would reduce. We don't know what the volumes are, the times of day. Again, at 10 o'clock on a Saturday night when there's cars everywhere, it's probably going to be hard to navigate as well. But it'll be a different crowd, a different, situation. So those are just some thoughts that I have in terms of, if some of the suggestions obviously were to go with the one-way northbound. And
we clearly can't do anything that would eliminate parking. Nobody wants to eliminate parking ever. And it seems to me that removing the center line doesn't do anything. It just takes, you're still going to have a too tight a thing. And it does seem to me that, again, solution is going to be to go to the one-way circulation. And from what I'm hearing from the audience, it ought to be northbound. So now there may be some other things we could be looking at. And again, the holistic approach that Commissioner Nofisi urged, I think is necessary. There's got to be some further look at how this might all play out on other streets and what would need to be done about that. And I understood from staff that will be happening if we make the recommendation to go forward, right? Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, so any other thoughts, comments, or maybe we ready for a motion?
The only thing I wanted to add is I don't see any way that we could do a restricted one-way. That is, one-way certain times of the day. I mean, are we going to be setting up barriers and then taking them down? I mean, that's just, that just
Well, you
doesn't.
just have signs, just one way, but that's, I mean, I don't think that works. well.
One way during certain hours of the day,
It's just-
or, it's
gonna be
all or nothing as
confusing.
far as
Yeah, I agree with that too. So anyone care to make a
I had a
question?
thought, and I see a couple hands up, but one of the things we could consider if it, like, say a one-way is a potential option is like a phased approach. I mean, do the parking, the turn restrictions as the first phase to see how that improves over the course of, I don't know, maybe like a 4 or 5 month period. If it improves to the point where the residents feel like, okay, this is actually better, maybe we don't have to do this. Then, to note that. If that obviously doesn't solve the problem, then you would take it to the next phase to actually do the full study for the one-way conversion.
Yeah, see, and that is the beauty of the restricted turn at the top of Alberta, is it doesn't affect anybody who lives on the street. It's a two-way street for those of you who live there. It's just everybody who wants to go southbound towards the school at whatever hours we put on it, that is the restriction. And there's still going to be some that are going to violate that, but we've used turn restrictions effectively in other areas that were trouble spots, and most people will obey it. And
it's enforceable.
And it's totally enforceable if, with whatever resources we have in that regard, right?
It's important to note that the restriction applies to residents too.
Yeah.
Residents aren't exempt. But I know there's been a lot of, questions about removing the center line and how it won't make the street any wider. But it's probably worthwhile for, the engineering staff to really explain the theory behind the behavior that can be modified from removal of the center turn lane, or just, maybe a little further explanation on the theory behind that.
Maybe I'll help out on that. I think, Andy, if you can go back to the slide that showed the vehicles.
This one?
Yeah, Lauren, you can.
Yeah.
Yeah, part of the reason why we recommended, as part of this, a consideration to remove the center line is that at a center line, a driver is obligated to drive to the right of that center line. And when there isn't adequate space for that vehicle to fit between a parked vehicle and that center line, then we're recommending the removal of that center line. That center line, unfortunately, is non-functional, and it's creating problems for us the way that it appears today. The removal of the center line does not widen the street, but it does indicate to the drivers that are using it that you could use essentially the usable space of that street, and one of them, in one direction or the other, has to jog in between parked vehicles or an empty spot to allow the other vehicle to come through. The center line itself, though, is creating a problem because it's not allowing that physical space to be there between a parked vehicle and the center line for a vehicle to traverse.
So it leaves the impression that there are two lanes when there really aren't.
Correct.
So
Correct.
Not having the center line there.
Yeah.
Everybody understands that they've got to yield to each other and dodge in and out. And
So with
this
this-
block, and Harkin is.
Right. So with the center line, there might be an impression that, maybe there is passable room for two
Right, but
cars.
there's not.
Whereas when the center line gets removed, maybe there's a little bit more negotiation between drivers and, can ultimately result in less
It seems-
mirrors being sideswiped.
You've got enough traffic going through, you're going to have problems, and that's what the proposal to go to a one-way street. would be.
On a side note, in streets that I've seen that are quite narrow, I mean, it's, a shame to say it, but sometimes it's also a good measure to control speed. When cars have to slow down and negotiate bypassing each other,
Traffic calming, then
that's a
what-
traffic
that's
calming
what-
measure.
Okay, so any further discussion, or anybody want to make a motion?
I just had two.
Chairperson, just one clarification on hearing the discussion of the commission. If the commission wants to consider making a motion to contemplate a turn restriction first and come back with further analysis, I would say because the turn restriction was neither part of the questionnaire nor part of the item, the commission would then ask us to go through the analysis to contemplate and come back at a future date to consider the turn restriction and any other movement modifications you'd like us to do. At this particular point, none of these residents that are present tonight, none of the residents that responded to the questionnaire contemplated a turn restriction, and it's unfair to them, and we can't legally take action on something that has not been identified as a potential movement change.
Okay.
And I would just add, if you don't mind, I would just add, we did address our just traffic calming policy in general in the past. And the iterative approach, although scientific and often gets us where we want to go, it takes a long time. And the perception is that these things just drag on. So I just would remind the commissioners of that part of the community that has had that experience and expressed a desire for us to move forward a little bit faster.
Yeah, so do we have a motion?
Is it too late?
No, go ahead, please.
What I wanted to say is this problem wasn't present before the school started limiting the entrances to their building. And now Alberta is the primary entrance that the students enter. So the traffic on the other streets is not going to affect the neighbors because they don't have, the students aren't going to be using those because the traffic, they want to be able to enter at Alberta, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Okay.
Did we have any comments online? Should have checked.
Sorry, there's no e-comments.
Okay, so
I will make a motion. And it is one of the staff's recommendation, and that is to make North Alberta a one-way street northbound that would naturally necessitate removal of the white line anyway. That's my motion.
And is there a second for that motion?
No.
Yes, no?
In absence of a second motion, of a second to that motion, if there's no second, then.
I'll second. I guess I can second it. Okay. I'll second the motion. I mean, I think that, again, it's a recommendation that
It'll go to city, it'll go to mayor and council for, for further deliberation, but I think.
staff for further deliberation and then to city council, right? Yeah, I'll second that.
So for discussion purposes, I hesitate only because I feel like we don't have enough information. I just feel like the options were presented to the community as the only options that we could do, whereas there are some potential other options we discussed tonight. Not that I don't support one way. I live in one way. I think it works great for our neighborhood, but this is a different neighborhood. And so if there are other options that could be explored as Ted suggested that we make recommendations to, I feel a little bit more comfortable if we recommend maybe the one way plus reporting back to the commission with other potential solutions as well, including just talking to the school and changing the way they let kids into the school, right? Which I feel with a new superintendent and new principals and all that, that could be a very viable solution to help alleviate some of these problems rather than a drastic approach like a one-way street. So that's my hesitancy. I don't disagree with the motion, but that just for.
Perhaps
Made and seconded.
If I may interrupt, just to provide a little comfort to your hesitancy, we could always agendize a turn restriction when we take it to council after we study that issue and provide that to the council as an option as well. Without it having to come
Would that
back
be
here.
appropriate to add to my motion then? Because you may recall, that was really I actually prefer that, a turn restriction at Carnelian. And now that I see the configuration at Irina, it's really no right turn. Well, no right turn on eastbound Carnelian and no left turn on southbound. That stops one whole direction of traffic southbound on Alberta based on whatever restriction, whether we make it permanent or school days, is subject to, further deliberation. But that kind of would be my first, because then it doesn't make it a one-way street.
what I'm suggesting is you could include that in your motion for us to look at.
Yes.
In addition to the one-way, as we take it to the council. And that way it's agendized at that point for the community, and we don't have to bring it back here and take the additional time for that.
Absolutely. So my motion is still,
We need an amendment to it, right? You want to make that amendment?
Well, go
I
ahead.
actually have a question before you move forward. I'm sorry. If you include that no turn sign, are you going to inform the residents that this is going to be discussed? I want to make sure they have the opportunity to weigh in, because I want to hear which one they prefer.
It's, what we can't do is decide on a no turn restriction tonight.
Yep.
You could, in your motion, ask staff to include that in their consideration in their holistic neighborhood traffic study of this issue. And when we bring it to council, that would be a part of the staff report, and it would be noticed in the agenda as so residents would be advised that that was part of the conversation at the council meeting, if that's the next step.
So advised or surveyed? I just want to understand what we're asking.
Commissioner,
I'm
if I
sorry.
can help with that,
Yes.
you may, as part of your motion, also ask us to re-notify the same 300 or so residents that we notified, that this is the motion by the commission, and that'll be taken to the city council for consideration on whatever that date is going to be.
Okay, so that's.
So the friendly amendment would be,
I guess the friendly amendment would just be to look into other solutions other than the three that are, to study other solutions such as turn restrictions as a potential alternative for the street, in addition to the recommended one-way conversion.
and advised residents.
And advise residents of such that, so they can voice their opinion to the city council.
Okay.
Sure.
That was a friendly amendment, I guess.
we have.
So we got that?
Do we have to second that?
I think we have a sec. Do you second it with that, with the amendment, friendly
I
amendment?
just made the amendment. Someone has to second the amendment.
I'll
right?
second the amendment.
Okay, all in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Aye.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Okay, now we've got the motion amended before us. Let's do a roll call on that, please.
Right, okay. Commissioner Bajaj?
Yes.
Commissioner Funabashi?
Aye.
Commissioner Nafisi?
Aye.
Commissioner Min?
Aye.
Chair Simpson?
Yes. Okay. Item J3, I guess.
Lauren, if you could give me my screen here. Okay, here's our third item tonight on traffic, and just want to apologize that we don't have anything besides traffic tonight. I know you've asked for that before, but we didn't want you to get out of practice on traffic stuff, so.
Thank you.
So this item before you is consideration of an always stop control at Steinhardt and Clark, Steinhardt Avenue, Clark Lane, and to review a portion of our always stop policy, which I'll get into, but we have thresholds when we don't meet the technical threshold to carry an always stop forward according to our current policy. We also survey the residents, and we have thresholds. A certain number of people must respond in the affirmative before we can move it forward according to our policy. And the council has asked us to look at that policy again, along with the consideration of this intersection. A little background on this intersection here. The intersection is a block southeast, I guess, of Aviation Boulevard. It does get traffic through that. We haven't done counts or anything. We are, last October, we took 8 stop signs in District 4 to the City Council for consideration. During the discussion, one of the council members wanted to add a 9th, but was prevented from doing that for consideration because it hadn't been agendized along with all the other intersections, which were actually in the title of the agenda item. So part of the motion that was approved was to bring this item back after it went through the normal quote-unquote process of our always stop control review, and also bring back a discussion conversation about whether the threshold is too high that would prevent staff from taking it forward otherwise. So I'll get into this in two parts. One, we'll talk about the intersection first. This is two residential streets. Clark is stop controlled at the intersection on each side of the subject intersection at Ford Avenue where it makes a T, and then at the four-leg intersection at Goodman. Goodman is not stop controlled there. Steinhardt is not stop controlled, nor is Ford stop controlled when it meets Clark. We sent out, according to our policy, we sent out surveys or actually petitions to the residents within 150 feet of the intersection. That was 21 addresses. We only received 2 in response. Both of them were supportive. Our policy requires that we get to a 66% threshold. And I'll give you a little background on that. Our policy has been for quite some time that when a resident makes an always stop request, barring some technical engineering reason like a line of sight issue or traffic collision issue, we require a 66% affirmative petition, a petition with 66% of the residents within 150 feet of the intersection to say, yes, we want that too, as a measure of local support for the intersection. So we've always done it that petition style for years and years. When COVID hit, we, and the restrictions with personal contact and that kind of thing, the city, as a kind of a favor to the residents, began to mail those requests to the address list rather than ask the resident to take it door to door. But we didn't change the 66% threshold. So that policy was approved by the city council last spring and has been fairly successful, except that this 66 percentile now looks different because it's no longer a petition of support of the neighbors. It's a response where we're getting yeses and nos and no responses. And so the council is interested in seeing that granularity of detail in our responses, not just waiting for the 66% to affirm. The other thing that changed last spring when we changed the policy was to shorten the timeline. We asked for a response within 4 weeks of when our survey letter was sent. Historically, we had given the resident 6 months to collect his 66 signatures. And so those two things changed with the policy in order to make it quicker and more convenient to the requester. However, the 66% threshold was never addressed. And so the council has asked us to look at that again and gather input from you and come with recommendations back to the council about whether or not that should be changed. So as far as the intersection goes, this would have been through our traffic calming process, would not have seen the light of day, as it were, with this commission or with the council, because we only got 2 of 21 responding, about 10%, and we had no technical threshold that we met with a line of sight issue or a collision history over the last several years that would have pointed us in the direction of recommending an always stop at this location. Because of the council referral, we are bringing it forward specifically despite that. Here is the policy chart that was approved last spring, and although this looks a little complex, it was markedly shorter and easier to understand than our former narrative policy that we had. But I'll review this quickly. We start with the always stop request at the top. We respond to the resident, let them know we got it. We begin immediately our safety review and evaluation, which involves a site visit by our traffic engineer, a study of collision history at the intersection. We also mail the resident survey where we ask them if they are in support. And because it was petition, we would say in that letter, if you respond to us, yes, we will count you as support. If you do respond no or do not respond, we will count you as a no, because we were just trying to get to 66%. And so in most cases, we didn't reach that threshold. And so if there were no engineering reason to bring it forward, the item, as you see, would follow the line where those two responses are no, and we would just close the matter, inform the resident that he didn't meet the thresholds. His or her recourse has always been to go directly to the council member and ask for the council member to bring it forward and refer it to staff to bring it forward to council. And so that's what happened in the case of Steinhardt and Clark. The city council member from this district asked us to bring this item forward. So that's why it's back in front of you tonight. Again, the 66%, you see I've got a red circle around that kind of decision tree marker there where we look at whether or not we get the response rate. And per the policy, city staff needs to receive 66% support from addresses within 150 feet of the intersection. So 2 things tonight to consider. One is simply, can the commission provide a recommendation of support for the always stop control at Clark and Steinhardt? Council has asked us to bring that forward through our regular process, as I mentioned, which does include bringing it before this group, this body, to deliberate and provide a recommendation for or against, we are asking for a recommendation about modifying the threshold for passing the public support test. And I've called them absolute support, which means we need to get an absolute minimum, which in the past has been 2/3 of the letters that we sent out, or the residences within the block. It could be a different number, but still use an absolute minimum type of approach. Or it could be a kind of more of a relative question, how many yeses versus how many nos versus how many no comments. Is 50% enough to advance it? Should it be 66? Should it be only 40%? We'll advance it. Those are opportunities for conversation. And then of the responses, if we send out 21 and we get only 2, even if they're both yes, is that enough to move it forward? What is a volume relative to the number we sent out that would kind of validate the yes versus no question of the responses we receive? So those are the 2 questions before you tonight. Any other actions that you determine, of course, we would be happy to take forward to the city council as well.
Comments, thoughts, questions?
Are we going to take a
Public comment.
public comment? Well, before we go there, just real quick question. Just so I'm clear, is going back to in-person petition process off the table?
Not necessarily, although the council was happy that we were providing that service in lieu of handing a resident a piece of paper and a list of addresses.
Got it. So it's not a desirable route? Okay. All right. That was it. But
Other questions, thoughts?
Yeah.
Public comment?
Oh.
Good evening, Scott Ventrudo, I'm at 1600 Clark Lane. I appreciate this is sort of a funky procedural issue. I just want to bring up the need for speed controls at this particularly dangerous intersection. We're talking about Aviation and Steinhardt. The 2 adjacent streets, Ford and Goodman, have either speed humps or additional stop signs. So Steinhardt is the only street that runs from Aviation to Marshall Field without any additional stop sign. I think that's true. So the street is extremely, people fly down the street coming off of Aviation, which I know you know that's a problem and that's beyond the scope. But the bigger issue is that there's a gym there, and that gym during COVID has stopped having a parking lot. So the neighborhood is the parking lot. And so at the intersection in question, there are cars parked such that it's a blind intersection. And so cars that are coming on Clark are crossing Steinhardt. And I've seen near misses and actual collisions. I'm not sure why those aren't reflected in the report. And just to flag that, I don't think that always stop is necessary. I think the residents, if there was also an opportunity because of COVID, there was an opportunity to go knock on doors and say hello to folks and talk to them about it. If there was that opportunity, I think people would be in favor of some sort of speed control at this intersection because speeds on Aviation are so high, even despite there's a slow down sign there now and no one seems to slow down. So yeah, that's all I have. Thank you.
Comments, thoughts?
We have one more from the public.
I have
Also? No,
Jeremy Cohen.
Hi, good evening, Jeremy Cohen. To piggyback on my neighbor's thoughts, I live on Steinhardt. Grew up in Redondo whole life. Recently moved here within the past 2 years, and the speed is bad. I have a new child, year-old. My neighbor does too. We don't plan on leaving. From the south to the north, there's a blind spot coming over the hill. And I'm about 2 homes in from Clark. So backing out's a problem. It's an issue. What I've noticed is a direct route from Ford, which is one east of us. From Artesia, basically all the way down, you have speed bumps, which are near the park, which is by Marshall Field. And then one adjacent, one west, you have a direct line, a direct thoroughway, basically from 190th all the way down. And some of them will cut across in the middle. We don't have a stop sign. I think a solution would be speed bumps. Regarding the 2 respondents out of 21, I don't know if going door to door would make a difference. I understand the whole analysis thing. We're cordial with our neighbors. If there's a solution, I mean, we would pay for that stuff. I don't know how that works, but if we could actually have that stuff looked at and not dismissed with the lack of respondents. So, but the park, which is just up the street, there's tons of kids and nannies there and parents, and you know, I just hope we are proactive versus reactive for safety. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any comments online or e-comments or Zoom or whatever we've got going that way?
There's no one on Zoom, and just refresh again, but there were no comments a second ago.
Okay. Discussion, any commissioner have questions, thoughts, or any of that sort of thing?
I mean, it seems like there's a speeding problem. That's the primary net cause of this request.
That's a little unclear. And we know that 4-way stops are not a solution to speed.
Yeah.
So I'm a little confused in terms of what the issue, I mean, are we talking sightline issues? Obviously, there's more cars that are parked, and we have that from testimony here. And I totally know the intersection. I mean, everybody flies down Aviation, you make a really hard left or, to get across oncoming traffic, and now you're flying down Steinhardt, that very first block. So a stop sign, seems like a good idea, but obviously that is not generally what we do to control speed.
Sir, if I may interrupt. With the speed bumps, I slow down. I see people slowing down. The speed bumps work.
Oh, absolutely. And that is a consideration, but it's not part of it's not part of what we've been asked to consider. Unless we open it up.
Whether we should advocate for whether we should support an all-way stop, right? That's the question that's before us.
That's correct.
And that
was a referral from council.
I'm assuming that, that's District 4, isn't it?
Correct.
So Councilman Obaji said, please bring it to us.
That's right. That's right.
Without having enough grounds to justify it.
Yeah. We don't have speed percentiles, average speeds.
All right.
So, I mean, I think the item before us is, and there's like 2 items really. One is the specific location, but also policy, a general policy item.
The referral was to, yes, bring this specific location before you with the data from our survey and safety review that we do, as well as bring the consideration of the threshold, the 66% threshold specifically.
So, my thoughts on the policy, the thoughts on the street seem like there's a speeding issue. And someone thought that a always stop is a solution to that. Whereas gentleman mentioned here, there's other things we could do for speeding, right? Like speed humps and other things. So that could be one discussion. We could have one sort of referral maybe we could do.
Well, I mean,
My thoughts on the policy is that, I think.
why don't we do focus on the stop sign first and back to the policy issue?
Sure.
Does anybody got thoughts on the stop sign? Always stop sign. Candace, anything you'd like to say?
I do. So you did do a study there? Like what, the recommendation for the stop sign came by the council member, but not by any other data?
We did what we normally do for our always stop when we get a request, which is to do our new policy is to go out and look at collision history, to look at sightline issues. Both were negative in this case for taking it forward, and then to do the survey of the residents.
That was negative as well.
That was correct.
And we are unaware of why the request was made. Like, why was there a request for a stop sign, not, a consideration of a speed bump? Is that correct? Or
I think it was me, and I don't think I understood. I thought that always stop was sort of the quickest way to get something done.
Okay, fair.
Chairperson.
Okay, that's great. That's good to know.
I'm going to have to interrupt and ask, if anyone in the audience needs to speak, they need to come up to the microphone so that we can get all this recorded,
As
please.
well. So did you have something you wanted to say? We'll let you speak again if you'd like to.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful.
Identify yourself again, please.
Scott Intruder again. I should say first, I'm a lawyer and not a traffic engineer. So I reached out to Councilmember Babaji, sort of in that capacity as a fellow lawyer, to say, hey, what can we do here? And he said, I have this concern in my district at a bunch of other intersections, make this always stop request. So I made the request because I think it's a dangerous intersection and I wanted to do something. I'm not attesting that an always stop is the only way to make it safer. The community would like something safer there, and we're willing to take a survey in person to gather that data. So thank you.
Okay.
And just to clarify, our policy does, I'm sorry to interrupt you, our policy does not prohibit a requester from going to door. We're just supporting them by sending the mailers out themselves. And that was part of the discussion last fall, that a requester we could give them the address list as well, and they could go door to door. Did you get the survey? Please fill it out and send it back. So we didn't mean to imply that we were taking that away out of their hands, but that we were trying to support that through the mailer. And some people don't like to do that. Yeah.
Any other thoughts on the, yes?
I do have a question just out of my own, I guess, edification. What is the process for speed humps right now in the city? How does that process work?
So we had a traffic calming policy we would throw that one into. And typically what we have found is that an initial conversation with our traffic engineering staff to kind of identify the problem and the likely potential solutions is the best first step. Rather than asking somebody to ask for speed humps or always stop or something that they may not understand because they're not traffic engineers, instead to call in first. And so that part of the process kind of got missed in the way that this came before you tonight. Yeah.
But I guess my question, it's still a service that is offered in the city of Redondo.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Call us, tell us. Merdad typically will come out and speak and visit and look at the site and all that kind of stuff and come up with some maybe short-term solutions and then some longer-term solutions, and we'll craft some kind of a response. If it requires a big investment for a study, we would probably bring that to you before we did that, and maybe even to the council, depending on how extensive that needed to be.
So just to make it clear, this request did not meet the requirements of the department.
Of the always stop consideration, yeah.
Right.
Which is how it's
not
how
enough
it
people,
presented.
not enough,
Correct.
not safety issues.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, and I think it's interesting to point out too that you did pull the data on accidents, and it is zero, and it's uncanny. It basically boils down to, especially when we know people have said, I've seen accidents, so we know they've happened. You've probably seen them. But if you don't report it to the insurance company or it doesn't work within that system, then we don't have that data to begin with. And although I don't always disagree. I mean, we know that stop signs stop people or certainly slow them down. It doesn't always stop them even, right? It does have the ability to slow people down, but it isn't one of our it isn't recognized within traffic mandates as a traffic or speed calming device. So, but I know there's a growing. I still remember a comment made not too many years ago of the people just want a four-way stop, so give it to them. And I know that has been done. So it is kind of in our purview, just, to make the suggestion.
But the issue is that the people want one, that there has to be a number of people around that particular intersection.
Right, to justify it.
To justify it. And from what I can see, none of those requirements have been met. Yes, Commissioner Bishop.
Another question for the staff. Since the policy for how to obtain concurrence or feedback from the community, since that has changed to be a mailer versus a petition process, has there been much success in obtaining sizable response?
Not since and not before either. We typically don't get a lot of, a 66% threshold even by petition is a pretty daunting standard.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I hear just one more moment?
Yeah, go ahead.
Scott Ventrudo again. I just want to flag again that during the time, November 2021, I don't think I would have been able to go door to door and request signatures. So to say that there's not data, there isn't data, but I don't think that we've been given the chance to collect it adequately.
Yes.
A couple of questions for you. I've been looking on the city website, and when I try to search for speed cushion petition, it's not easily findable. Is that intentional?
No.
Okay. It's not searchable.
We have a citywide plethora of information on the website that makes everything a little bit harder to find. It is something that we're working on another topic.
Please. Very important, right?
Our traffic engineering page has been distilled down to just a few links for the very most often asked questions. So there's, I think, 4 links there that will get you to the always stop process and the traffic calming process pretty quickly.
Okay, thank you. And then the second issue is, it sounds like there is a speeding problem on the street, and it seems like you are alluding to the fact that adding this stop sign will not curb speeding. So can we evaluate another option to mitigate the speeding, which seems to be the true concern, and that this request was perhaps made by mistake just to, deal with speeding? Can we look at some other options? Maybe he can go out and look at that
Absolutely.
area and,
Yep.
okay. So I'd be happy to make a motion in that regard.
Well, okay, let's hear
Unless,
your motion.
I'll wait,
Yeah,
I'll
I
wait
was just going to say, I think out of unintentional, good intentions to find a solution, they went through the council office and kind of averted the typical traffic calming process. And so it feels like we certainly, as Commissioner Nafisi is saying, we could certainly make a recommendation to look at other solutions than just a stop sign. Or basically go through the typical traffic calming evaluation that you would go through if that had been requested that way instead. So that'd be my inclination.
should I make the motion? Do you guys want to?
Well, are we now supposed to talk about the policy issue? Is those going to be kind of brought up in
Separate
two?
motions, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I suppose you could bring it in 2 motions. We can.
I think that would be the way to go forward.
Okay.
Cleaner, yeah.
So go ahead with your motion, Commissioner Nafisi.
I'd like to make the motion that staff will evaluate other options besides the 4-way stop and regroup after you have staff go out and meet with the residents and spend some time evaluating it.
Just so I can tell the council, is that, just to clarify, you're not recommending an always stop, but that we do something else? Is that right? The traffic calming.
Yes, we're not supporting the always stop, correct? And asking that traffic calming measures be investigated. Is that?
Correct.
Okay, is there a second for that motion?
I'll second.
Yeah.
And then I just have a quick question following that same line is, does it make sense and is it possible to do an analysis of traffic on the other block that's to the west? We've got Ford, we've got Steinhardt, and then we've got the other, because I noticed the other street has the same stop sign configuration with the same ability to come flying off of Aviation. So I imagine that there's probably similar issues on that same street in terms of speed.
Which one?
The street that is directly west of Steinhardt.
It's Goodman.
Goodman. No, Goodman is, it's Ford, Steinhardt, Goodman. So yes, Goodman. And does that, I mean, is it more effective to do a couple of streets in a row, the same analysis?
When
for
we get
speed?
into traffic calming options, like speed cushions, for instance, we typically look at the neighboring streets as well because there is a carryover effect.
Sure.
Yeah, so.
I would just worry that I don't want any, hindrances on Goodman to delay any progress on Steinhardt. For the residents who are active on Steinhardt who
Absolutely.
want to see something, shouldn't have to be.
That's what this motion would do.
Right.
Okay, so we have a roll call vote on that?
Okay, Commissioner Bajaj,
Aye.
Commissioner Funbashi,
Aye.
Commissioner Nafisi. Aye. Commissioner Min,
Aye.
Chair Simpson.
Aye. Now, the second question, I guess, before us is whether the requirements for public support be changed.
That's correct. Lauren, if you could just throw up that screen one more time.
And that's based on the council asking for that? I'm sorry, or?
That's right. The council, all consider, not just the council member from that district, but all of them seem to be chewing on this 66% threshold as excessive. And again, the evolution from a petition style where you're getting an absolute minimum amount of support, which reflected this council, at least up until now, and previous councils' desire to make all-way stops harder than easier, not impossible, but harder than easier, seems to be changing. And so there's openness to what if we only got 20% of the responses and half, 3/4 of them were yes and quarter was no, is that enough to move it forward? So those are the kinds of questions they're asking and input they're looking for as we bring this back.
So I have a question in that regard. If it's currently 66% of all those mailed out must respond.
That's correct.
And then from the response, which again has to be 66% or greater.
They have to respond in the affirmative.
Respond in, okay.
Of those responding.
If we send out 100, we need 66 yeses. And if we get 0 no's or if we get 34 no's, as long as we get the 66 yeses, that's the threshold.
But if only 40 people respond,
Then we're not going to
you
get there.
don't get your.
That's right.
And so now everyone else is penalized by lack of action of those.
Which perhaps is a casualty of the mailer versus the personal touch of door to door.
Yeah.
Which COVID kind of sent us in this direction, but maybe it was an overcorrection. I don't know. That's the question, I think.
Yeah.
I just want to throw something crazy out for thought. If it was changed from a 66 response rate affirmative to the total mailing, I'm just going to throw it out. If we said 50.1, that is just over the 50% mark response, and then whatever the majority is of the response, I mean, in theory, 26% could, in the affirmative, pass something. Is that a little too loose? The crazy thing is there's such a tremendous apathy or lack of the response part. It's amazing anything gets done if we had to really, and so we end up making a lot of decisions. But also this means that in this case, it wouldn't move forward at all, right? Just because there just isn't. So I don't know. How do you guys feel about lowering the threshold of response and then lowering actually the majority is what gets, I don't know. Anyway, that's just a thought for discussion.
So I'm sorry.
Please, go ahead.
So if I understood that correct, you were saying that at least 50%, 50.1% of the total must respond, and out of those responses, at least 50.1% must be in favor.
So in other words, of 26% of the responses of the things sent out could do it.
And it's the reason why I'm thinking this way is there's even a movement to to change runoff elections. When neither candidate gets 50%, but one clearly got the majority, we got to go back and, and take the top two and start over again, and the associated costs and things like that, where if the majority is the majority that responded, sometimes I go, well, if you didn't respond, then and you're upset that there's a four-way there, then you didn't respond. But there's other issues as far as like, are they getting the mailer? I wish I knew more about why the response is so low. Are people seeing it and going, I don't care? Or if I don't respond, it's going to be a no? Is that what they're trying? But, again, and I imagine these are by mail. Is it free to return? Is it a postage paid or, like the...
No postage necessary.
No postage.
We don't send a self-addressed stamped envelope, no. We do invite them to either mail it back, to email it back, take a picture, email it back, walk it in, any way they can get the information to us, yeah.
But not that business reply for free.
We don't do it
which
that way.
that could affect it a little bit too, which makes it harder to kind of really,
Is there an online, oh, sorry.
That's okay.
He said you could take a photo of it and email it,
It's kind of like
which is a little cumbersome for some.
my father-in-law would have no clue how to do that, so. I'm wondering, there's like an online form, you just click the URL, put your vote in, your address and name.
Google form, one address submission per response, or?
Right.
Yes.
Kind of like Evite.
I do think us mailing items is very antiquated in general. Who gets stamps? It's very difficult. It's just like not high priority. I do want to say I do support lowering the threshold. I live on an exceptionally large block. We got speed cushions. It was like a full-time job trying to get 66% of 70 houses. Was very difficult, and people aren't home and people work and you're just like, you're chasing after that. It's very difficult. So I like the 50.1. I'll even meet you in the middle and go to like 55 if we feel like it's too aggressive to go down to 50. But I do think we need to lower the threshold. It's far too high at this point, and we're relying on our residents to do this advocacy, and it's really the city's responsibility to be reaching out to the residents, not the residents to go door to door and get this threshold. But
the crazy thing though, and if we lower the thresholds and something makes its way to mayor and council, the public still has another bite at the apple.
I know, but
And they've had, and if they've really not liked that we took such a small percentage and are proposing speed humps. Most people would be agreeable to speed humps. I don't think it would be the majority. But in theory, if we did move forward on a measure we were going to implement and somehow, some way we got it wrong, and the citizens heard like, no, we don't want speed humps. We don't want it, hypothetically, they would still have an opportunity to, obviously that would be part of our presentation. If it got that far to being presented to us, we would have an opportunity to, even we could decide that we weren't really happy, even though I'm proposing these lower thresholds. There might be somebody in the audience that would make a compelling argument against that lower threshold, or really just against the project. Yeah.
All the threshold does is get the project started.
Yeah, get city staff on it to move forward. Otherwise, and we're moving forward. Obviously, we've got the issue before us tonight, which is...
Craig, I'm so sorry, you guys. I haven't finished my
I'm sorry.
thought. That's
Please, go
okay.
ahead. I'm sorry.
I
Go ahead.
apologize. I just want to finish my thought. I was in the middle
course.
of it. So that's one thing. And I would like to get out of the process that we are really relying on our residents to have to circulate petitions for something that the safety of our community. It's a lot of work. And I understand the intent behind it. You're trying to build momentum and say, here, I went door to door and I got these signatures. But it's a tremendous amount of time for our residents, the community. And if they're coming here to say that they have a problem, we should just evaluate it to the best of our capabilities, mail them what we can, pray we get some type of response back. However, the way that we're contacting them is incredibly antiquated. It's clearly stated in the response back from the residents, which is also concerning. So I'm not exactly sure what the answer is. And it might be that we have to change the way that we communicate to our residents because it's not working, and it's by a long shot. Like, I'm looking at these maps of you guys that include into our packets, and you see the dots and barely anyone responds. So why are we doing it if we're not getting a response rate that's adequate? I don't feel like we're doing our due diligence in connecting with the public. to even inform them this is happening. And I'm not sure what the recommendation is. It's just trying to think out loud, to think about another opportunity to make sure they get it and make sure they respond.
What would the impact be? You finished?
I'm finished.
What would the impact on staff be if the threshold were substantially lowered? Would it flood the department with more requests than it could handle? I mean, what was the thinking in having this particular threshold?
The thinking in this particular threshold, I think, was an aversion to always stops in general. I think historically, and again, I've only been here 6.5, 7 years, but I did get the impression that prior councils preferred not to put a stop sign, quote, on every corner. And so they kept a fairly high threshold where the residents had to convince them that they really wanted this. I just looked at our October 4th meeting agenda report for the council. That's the meeting where we took 8 stop signs in District 4. The council member from that district had posted on his website an issue on stop signs, and he had suggested a number of them that people respond to. So he did a survey. We also did our own survey based on the addresses. And the response rate varied from, it looked like about 20 to 40%. 41, I think, was the highest. And none of them met the threshold, of course, with that response rate.
And none of them came before this council.
And no, they were all short-circuited directly to the council by referral from the council member from that district. And so to the prior point about, are we doing this the right way? That's something that we've been racking our brains. How do we get email information, for instance, by address? I mean, if you're a membership society, then you can collect that, but we're not that. How do you put out a broad survey on your website and not get responses from people in Torrance, for instance? And how do we push through that? That is a lot of work to go through those kind of survey numbers. So we're still figuring that out, partly in our department, partly in our city manager's office through our new website. So great comments. I think, that is part of the issue here is how do we communicate with these particular residents? And we haven't brought it up in this conversation, but the 150-foot basically is 3 houses in one direction and one house deep in the other direction for most of our lots. And so is that the right sample size? Maybe it should be something else.
Commissioner Bashad.
Just kind of a side note, I guess, I know particularly City of Los Angeles, for a traffic engineering study for a stop sign, there is no public public
input.
Thank you. Public input process. It's a traffic engineering study which authorizes it or it doesn't. I know, we have engineers here who have worked at other jurisdictions. Do you know if other cities also have a public input process for any other places that you're familiar with?
No, I'm not aware of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually really surprised that we had that. I was like, wait, that's not MUTC compliant. How can we do this? I mean, how can you just override federal rules on this? And
so my point in saying that is, I think a high percentile rate or high percentage rate to authorize something is merit. If we're going to have it, then it should be something that has an overwhelming requirement to fulfill. So I'm actually supportive of a more, of a more stringent, requirement.
Okay.
I mean, I feel like similar to what we had in the prior, at Clark here. I mean, there's clearly an issue the community had with safety and speeding, and the stop signs were a potential solution. So, although I'm not really against lowering the threshold, I just feel like there's no technical merit or safety merit. It needs to be robust. But perhaps part of that process is to come before this commission and plead your case for something and have no threshold at all, but have a very strong case with, at least a certain number of, testimonies or something along those lines to plead the case. Maybe there's just this one property that is overwhelmingly affected by a safety issue that a stop sign could address versus, the entire community, right? So I don't know if there's room for something like that per se, not have a threshold at all, but have everything case by case sort of evaluated.
Going back to, if we do maintain a higher threshold or, something more robust, I do agree with Commissioner Nafisi that, a mailer might not be the most effective means. And, brainstorming, another option that has a higher likelihood of obtaining responses could be in our best interest. Google form or something like that with like a drop-down menu of, if you're surveying 6 houses on each side, I don't know how you generate the addresses for who you send the mailer to, but maybe we just put it on a pull-down menu on a Google form. So that way, each address only gets one submission. And it's already like kind of preloaded.
We don't have email addresses for each of those addresses, though.
But
there
like
another way to
maybe
do
a
that?
mailer that provides them a link or,
That's exactly
like log on to this website, one of those tiny URLs.
I think that's in the works. I think that's
Yeah.
part, we don't have that capability right now, but that's in the works.
They're revising the website, right? The city's website's being, so
It
that's.
is.
Any other comments, thoughts? I'm sounding, some of us seem to feel that it should stay where it is, possibly even go higher. You wanted it lower?
I just suggested it. I mean, it's quite clear that where it is now is too high for it to move forward, but maybe that's a good thing. I mean, maybe that's the expectation that we have on our community, that many, otherwise, and let's face it, anything you do, there's always going to be, some in the community that didn't want it, or didn't see the need for it. And so we do have to kind of go on, as best we can, quite often, majority rules to the best of our ability. So that's the only, but obviously lowering the threshold so that we could get something a little more, well, it seemed meaningful, but at the end of the day, we still have as a commission, the ability to well, of course, if it doesn't come to us, then we don't get an opportunity even to weigh in and deliberate on it. But I just think that most of the time when we review it as a commission, I'm always appreciative when it does ultimately go to mayor and council, or if it just goes to them directly with the same staff presentation that we would get, and they decide,
Got a quick question. Is there a process for removing stop signs? Could someone submit a petition for 66% to remove a stop sign?
We don't have a nice flow chart for removing.
Sounds like a red X.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like we install it and it never comes
Called a
out. but-
hacksaw.
But maybe there would be justifications.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I was going to say that, can you? Yes, absolutely. You can request the removal of a stop sign is a little bit more critical in the removal process. When you don't have a stop sign, you can look at accident history and determine if the free flow movement is contributing to that accident history or not. When you have an all-way controlled stop intersection, you're not going to get that kind of information, and therefore the removal may be experimental rather than confirmed, and sometimes that becomes a liability. Can it be? Absolutely. It's a little bit more stringent in the analysis process. And back to the question before, the stop sign on the technical side, yes, we can go through the California MUTCD warrant analysis, if you will, and determine whether it's warranted or not. What Andy mentioned in this flow chart is that we're doing the preliminaries, which are the initial line of sight and assessment by the engineer, and then any reported traffic accident history to see if either of those thresholds can garner support by the staff members. At this particular point, if those are not identified, as is the situation here, then we don't have the technical support to move that forward. It does not preclude the city council. The city council, though, does have the authority to request the stop sign without any technical background whatsoever. And that's essentially where, in this particular location, the council member attempted to see if we could add it to the 8 other locations being considered. The fact that it was not agendized as such prohibited the city from taking action. And at the end, the recommendation was referral was bring it to the commission, have it go through the assessment process, and come back. You're absolutely right. Stop signs are not a popularity contest. They are a technical element that gets placed in.
So to be clear, this particular, the intersection in question was more of a procedural issue where it was not agendized as part of the other intersections. But it sounds like because it was brought by a specific councilman in a specific district, that it could have just as easily been voted on had it been agendized with the others. And there'd be a stop sign along with the others as well, right?
Had it been previously
Had it been
agendized, the
that's
answer would have been yes.
Again, just procedural technicality. And and we don't have the benefit of any kind of testimony, but we have to kind of safely presume that even though it was an afterthought, which is why it wasn't part of that big, larger group, that for all intents and purposes, the merit of the other 7, this one has the same merit, some neighborhood concerns and what is expressed. So yeah, the only thing is we as a commission obviously are the ones that look at the traffic counts, the speed counts, the 85th percentile.
We've already passed the motion,
And,
but
yeah.
we're not recommending.
That we don't recommend it, so.
So what are we going to do on the second question here? Are we going to move to lower the threshold? Or are we going to move to leave it the same? Or are we going to raise it? Anybody?
Trying to kill us?
No,
I'm kind of inclined to keep it the same, only because if any one of the districts has a strong enough compulsion to bring it forward as a council person, then there's a 4-week stop they do all the time. There's going to be 4-week stops popping up all over town right now as we speak.
Well, a whole bunch and just.
So that overrides what,
probably met the criteria.
Yeah, and then it really did pass a different kind of muster of not being the 70 or 60, 66%. It was I got my council person's ear. That's all.
Is there, part of this motion is to consider the form of communication? I mean, is that part of this policy that we are here to discuss? Like, can I make a motion to leave the threshold values the same, but explore alternative methods of communication? Or alternative methods to submit feedback?
Response.
The referral did not include that, but I can see how that wraps into the conversation about the threshold. And so we would probably take that back as feedback from this group.
So then I would propose a motion similar to that of leaving the existing threshold values the same and exploring alternative
ways,
forms to submit your response.
To improve response.
I mean, the goal is to improve it, but you know, the motion is to provide alternate options to submit your response.
Okay. So do we have a second for that?
I'll make the second.
Okay. May we have a roll call vote, I guess, please?
Commissioner Redondo.
Aye.
Commissioner Kubashi.
Aye.
Commissioner Easton.
Aye.
Commissioner Lynn.
Aye.
Chair Simpson.
Yes. So those are the two motions then. We did not support the Clark Steinhoff sign, and then we've gone, okay. So where are we on the agenda? That probably
It's our favorite part.
brings us to, why am I not able to? Oh, come on.
I would like a study of every 4-way intersection in the city.
I'd like to see speed bumps. We are now on item K, which is members' items and referrals to staff. Why don't we just start down at this end? Anything, Commissioner Min, for referrals to staff?
Actually, no, nothing comes to mind. So.
Okay. Commissioner Fisi.
So I got a couple. On the 2300 of Hill Lane, the street is wildly unpaved. Is that on the schedule, possible to be repaved anytime soon? How do I get the answer to that?
We have that information not here with us tonight. We could certainly email that to you.
Fantastic. Yep. The slide at Lilienthal Park is broken, has been broken for a long time. Any ideas on when that will get fixed?
Research that.
Yeah, we'll look into that. That's an operations matter. I don't
Okay,
Yeah, but I know who does, so, yeah.
fantastic. I'm not done, hold on, give me a second. And then one of the residents mentioned coming out of the alleyway behind the 600 block of Maria. I want to see if we can evaluate the parking on Beryl to accommodate, because a lot of large cars parked there and they can't see out of the alleyway. Is there a way to take a look into that?
That was the first speaker, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and she wants to look into the feasibility of redlining, right?
Exactly. Maybe just,
Red
Did you
curve,
get-
yeah. We'll
Did you get the
investigate that.
address on that?
Well, as I understand it, it's the alley to the east of Maria. I guess it would have to be,
I believe that's right.
because there's no alley
I believe that's what you
it's the alley going to Beryl.
between Beryl
Very
and
bad
Carnelian, it would be, I guess, then. No, Carnelian.
No. It's the alley
one more
going-
along.
Paulina and Maria.
It's the alley between Paulina and Maria.
Correct. Okay. And then
Parallel to, yeah.
Yeah, where it intersects
Right.
Beryl.
Yeah,
speed cushions is virtually unfindable on your website.
okay.
Can you help me
Yes.
get that up there? And then I remember we had the petition posted on the website for a long time. People could just download the petition. And if you don't want to encourage people to do the petition, to stop with you first, which is fine. Maybe just the directions on, hey, this is the process. This is what it looks like. I think that would be very helpful.
We do have a flow chart for that.
Okay.
It doesn't specifically mention speed cushions, but it's for traffic calming in general. But yeah, I can send you
Or even
that.
just like is it possible to do a bullet on the website under traffic mitigation, process for speed bumps?
Yeah, we had, I think it was there before, but we
Yeah,
had pulled
it's
it off
disappeared.
because it's about 8 pages of if-then kind of statements,
Got
and
it.
it was very confusing, and
Got it.
we just want to direct people to a person first so they didn't get lost in that.
Which is
But,
fine too.
yeah.
Just even.
We can do both.
Speed cushions, go to him. Some direction. Yeah. Would be great. Thank you.
Commissioner Nafisi, if I may help, when you go to the city website, you go to the Public Works Department, go to Engineering Services. Underneath there is traffic engineering. And when you go to traffic engineering, there will be 4 items on the left side of it.
Okay.
Under resources, the
my God.
resources will give you that information. Now,
I'm sure
the
they'll find it so
website
easy.
is changing. It's going to become a lot more user-friendly. I'm just saying that's where it is.
Okay, it's under engineering services,
Okay, have
not
you-
traffic services.
We'll
Okay.
send you the link, yeah.
Thank you.
Anything else?
That's it. Thank you.
Okay,
It's like, I want it on the start page. Street problems?
I don't know. I just,
Question mark.
It is a
Click on
very
this and
common
then-
request.
Oh
Let's
my
just
God.
be
Yeah,
honest.
yeah.
It's being buried under engineering is a little.
Commissioner
A little hint.
Furubashi.
I have no referrals this meeting, thank you.
Commissioner Bouchard, referrals.
No referrals.
I have one, sort of a question. The app where you can report problems that the city needs to look after is very successful and very responsive usually. But I recently pointed out that at Andrews Park, where it borders the water property, a little piece of fence was taken down. And there are 2 little pieces of the former fence poles sticking up out of the ground. And one of them is very sharp. And the other one is a trip hazard. One, somebody fell on it, they really, and kids went around in there, it's close to the park. And I put it in and I got back a thing saying a work order had been assigned. I don't remember the number, I don't have it with me right now. But nothing's happened yet. Now, maybe that's because of the rain, maybe they're gonna get somebody looking at it, but it's a little piece of concrete that's still there, and then 2 little former bases of fence poles protruding.
Chair Simpson, if you can, that response that came back to you from Comcate, if you can forward that to me via email, I'll make sure and look at it.
So I should copy it from the.
Yeah, you could just take that and forward that information to me
Yeah,
via
I'll
email.
send it
That would
to
be
you.
perfect.
Yeah, okay. Yes.
Just real quick, want to thank Public Works Department for the recent rains. Seems like all the storm drains were functional, just, from what I saw, driving around the city, and, just quick response to any issues. So, thank you to your field crews and, to everyone in the Public Works Department.
It may well have been that the rain caused the backlog and it just hasn't been gotten to yet. But it usually is very, very effective and very, very responsive.
One last thing too.
Yes, please.
I also have a thank you. I did a request on the Access Redondo on a broken street lamp. It was like fixed in like 3 hours. It was like crazy. So thank you. Just very magic.
Very, very quick.
It was crazy. Couldn't believe it. So
I just want to call your attention to an email that we sent you all regarding a bus tour for, related to the Green Line expansion. So the details are on that flyer. If you feel free to share that. I think I should ask that question first. Is this open to the public or was it?
It is not open to the
Okay,
public. This
sorry.
is primarily geared for electeds and commissions and city staff, but primarily for electeds and commissioners to attend.
What's the capacity for that? It was 60 or something, wasn't it? I did say.
Space is limited. That's all I can see here.
Yeah.
It's germane to you. Next month, we'll be bringing an item per council's direction regarding the Green Line expansion and the alignments that are being considered by Metro. So that will be a discussion. I understand their draft EIR is supposed to come out tomorrow.
Right.
And so that it will create a buzz in the community, certainly, and the council is looking for input from a number of the commissions.
Has everybody seen the
commission
video?
The city council had given a referral a while back to bring that to the Public Works Commission, to the Planning Commission, and to the Rec and Parks Commission, I
Maybe Rec
believe.
and Parks, yeah.
And we had planned to bring it to you this month until after a few conversations with Metro staff, they said that they would release the draft EIR on the 24th, which is the day after today. We figured it didn't make sense to come solicit your input today and then have them release that draft EIR tomorrow. So as soon as we receive the link to the draft EIR, we will share that with you in anticipation of having, receiving your input on that at the February commission meeting.
Anyone have any other referrals, comments, or thoughts? Would anyone like to make a motion
This
to
is until
adjourn?
March 2nd.
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
And we have a second for that?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Thank you all.